I'm with Jeff King. We are at Surfaces 2015. We're in the WFCA stand. This is the last day, and as you know, there's a surprising crowd in here for the last day.
It's been much busier than we've seen in various years. You would think this is a little more midweek than last day.
But I don't know what that means, but it means a lot of people have shown up and they stay here to the last day. They're not playing slot machines.
My hope is that's an indication of our economy making a recovery, and that our the flooring people and the remodeling people and all those folks are starting to find real work, starting to come back at a rapid pace. And I believe our members will tell you that's slowly happening.
I think that is the case. Now, Jeff King is the legislative counsel. He's actually you are the attorney for the floor covering for the WFCA, and you deal with a whole raft of things that impacts retailers and others in this industry. And I thought it might be a good idea to sort of recap some of the projects that you've been involved in, which are many and varied. And you've also been doing this for a long time, so you've got a good historical feel for what's happening. First, I wanted to ask you just about the installation standard. That's something that you've been involved in for 5 years, I guess.
Yeah, it's called the S600 Carpet and Rug Installation Standard. It's a joint effort. It's going to be an ANSI standard. It was the process was overseen by IICRC, the Restoration Certification folks, which is an ANSI organization. It has just passed through their process and has been approved by them. It will be submitted in the next 3 to 4 weeks to ANSI itself, who will review everything, any objections, any minority reports, all of that, and most likely will then issue the standard. So the standard should actually be out and effective within the next 6 to 8 weeks. There is still a process in ANSI after that where someone can object to the standard, but during that objection period, the standard is effective, it's utilized, and that it will be, unless those objections are upheld, it will remain a standard. About every 3 years is a review to make sure the standard has not need to be changed or updated in any way, and that process will almost start immediately upon the standard being issued, believe it or not.
What's your take, Jeff, on how that standard will change things in this industry as we know them?
I think there's a lot of changes that will happen. First of all, it's quite detailed. It's close to an 80-page document, and then there'll be probably a several hundred-page manual with it of ultimately done, sort of guidelines of how to do it. But it's quite deliberate. It goes from things like you have to use power stretchers on carpet. If you're going to use a knee kicker, you're going to use it for corners and stuff. You're not going to try to stretch your whole carpet simply with a knee kicker. It's going to require 3 tack stripping, as opposed to, as you know, in the past few years, particularly with some of the big boxes, they try to get away with 2 tack stripping. It's going to talk about responsibilities, there's issues with moisture control and stuff, and a lot of times they'll try to lay it on the installer. Well, the installer doesn't pour the concrete. They generally often don't even have the equipment to test the concrete. And next thing you know, they're supposed to be checking the moisture level, but they have no idea how much sand, water, or concrete mix was actually used in that. So it says, no, that's the general contractors to determine who has to do that. It's not just automatically on, the guy who's going to be kicking this carpet in. It's 12 chapters of very detailed explanation of how carpet should be in. It has patterns. It talks about how to match them. It talks sewing. I mean, it is a how-to manual that ensures proper installation, with an initial chapter that talks about you're responsible to make sure this is right. I'm responsible for that.
Jeff, I've heard something say maybe there's too much detail. I don't know. How does one determine that?
The initial draft of it that about a year and a half ago came out, there was much too much detail. But it included things like OSHA regulations. Well, OSHA regulations can change daily. We deal with those every day in this industry. OSHA just made a major change in reporting. Well, if you had this manual, if you had this standard out, and it would have the wrong OSHA standard on reporting injuries. There's OSHA standards on so many things. We took that out. That's a federal regulation. Maybe in our guidelines we can talk about OSHA a little bit, but it shouldn't be a standard because it's not our standard. OSHA is a federal standard. It had how to run your business. It talked about insurance and all that. That's not in an installation standard. That's in a how to run a business standard. All of that has been taken out. So this is strictly who the players are and what they're supposed to do, and then how to put it on the floor, how to move it and put it on the floor. There's storage issues, for example. If you stack carpet up, 200 on the top of one another, you're going to have a real pile problem with your carpet over time. It'll crush it. If you put it, you don't store it in the proper location with moisture, you can have other problems. So you have to acclimate it to the room. All of those are there.
How is, in your view, will this be used going forward? It seemed to me that if a manufacturer doesn't necessarily connect their warranty to this established standard, it would be less important. Would that be true?
It will certainly adversely affect it. I think some manufacturers probably will. It's a competitive edge. We're doing it to the top line ANSI standard. Secondly, if you were to pick a court was looking at and say, was this installed correctly or not installed correctly, will they look at what the manufacturers got together and decide it would be a proper standard? Or they look at a standard that was done through a complete public process? What would you do? And thirdly, it is not uncommon for the federal government and states to pick up ANSI standards as their standard for construction.
Well, that was what I was wondering, assuming, and you as a lawyer, you have a case that involves installation of carpet. You're going to bring in this standard, whether it's recognized by manufacturers or not, aren't you?
Absolutely. The vast majority of the issues are going to be, did you install it correctly? So it's not going to even, there are going to be defects in carpet. I deal with cases every day. I've got 2 big cases now going on about defective carpet. It happens. Mistakes happen. And you resolve those mistakes amicably and such. But the question is could it be installed? And that will be a little bit under this issue. But more importantly, most of it, did you stretch it correctly? Did you allow it to sit and acclimate to the room? Is the pile not coming back because you stored it for 6 months, under too many carpets? Those are real issues that have very little idea whether the manufacturer cares or not. They're whether that's the homeowner, the installer, the retailer, or the distributor.
That will be established. Okay, this should have happened, that should not have happened, and that will be in this. Okay.
And the courts are going to look at that issue. And you're going to have experts come in and say, this should have been stacked no more than 3 high. And they have pictures showing it was stacked 10 high. That there was a leaking roof in the warehouse. And so that obviously caused some moisture problems in this carpet. And, or on anything that's, even peel down and all of a sudden they start to delaminate. You could see why that could happen.